All right, 11 o'clock. Let's get started. Good morning, everyone. We're thrilled to have you join us for our Every Day is Earth Day webinar series hosted by Emerald Built Environments. Today, we will be talking about employees matter in carbon emissions reporting. My name is Lisa Peterson, and I'm the growth manager here at Emerald. Few housekeeping items. Please feel free to ask questions during the presentation in the Q&A feature, and we will get to as many as possible at the end of the presentation. We are recording this webinar and will make it available to all registrants. Today's presenters are Laura Steinbrink, member of Emerald Built Environments, and guest Jack Brunner from Carbon Neutral Club. Laura has an unparalleled understanding and passion for sustainability, and it shows. And she makes a difference in the design, construction, and maintenance of all building types through her work. She has been in business since 2008, assisting clients along their sustainability journey. And Jack is joining us as our special guest and is the co-founder of the Carbon Neutral Club Emerald is a member of. With that, let's get started. Take it away, Laura.
Hi, so thanks so much for everyone being here today. I just want to do a quick overview of Emerald Built Environments. We are sustainability consultants working across the globe. Our main goal, our 2030 goal, is to enhance 2030 sustainable environments. Every month at the end of the month, we have an internal celebration of several things, least of which is also our carbon emission offsets, for how we're reaching towards our goal. And we are at 1,423, which is awesome movement towards that. And we work primarily with building owners, their architects, engineers, contractors, and operations team to make those sustainable spaces, new construction, major renovation. And we also do a significant amount of consulting directly with businesses, organizations on their sustainability goals and their roadmaps. So what we're here to do today is really talk about employees and the role employees play in emissions reporting, because we can't get to reporting and we can't get to neutral without our teams. So we're going to be revisiting some of the scopes that we talked about in last month's webinar. We're going to engage in dialogue with Jack about Carbon Neutral Club, about how to identify and explore and connect with employees and tools that you can use to have really a robust reporting process and engagement program. And then we're here, like we said, to take your questions. So remember to put those into the chat feature, the Q&A feature, and we'll be ready to roll. So just a quick reminder that if you are still trying to get your mind around scopes and the different scopes and what's involved, we did talk about this more thoroughly in last month's webinar, which soon will be posted up on our website and sent out. So feel free to let us know if you would like to see that. But what we know to be true is that employee activity and the actions that employees take that result in emissions is what we're talking about here. So it mostly falls in scope 3 emissions, and Jack's going to get to that a lot more in just a second. But there's a little bit in the scope 1 and 2 as it relates to the transportation and the commuting that employees have, that organizations who are reporting need to understand where those emissions are coming from and what they need to do to engage their employees. So Jack, they don't really want to hear from me all day long. Let's get this rolling. Tell us why employees matter in emissions reporting.
Yeah, thanks, Laura. Hi, everybody. So there's two reasons. So obviously, question of the day today, but there's two core reasons employees matter in a huge way doing emissions reporting. The first is employees as a source of emissions. So the slide we're looking at is speaking to that. And the second is employees as stewards of a net zero strategy long term. So starting with the first, employees as a source, you'd be staggered to the degree that employee behavior generates carbon emissions comparable to the entire organizational footprint. Specifically within scope 3, the obvious categories that employees directly impact are categories 6 and 7, employee commuting to and from work, and business travel, flights, ground travel, hotels, all of it. Now, obviously, this footprint composition we're looking at is hugely generalized. It is an example based on our entire client base. But it is fact in a lot of cases. particularly with companies who have now like a work from home reality or maybe a hybrid scenario, don't necessarily have a massive scope 1 and scope 2 direct and indirect emissions from their effort. Scope 3 is a huge part. Their entire value chain is a large part of their footprint. And within that, the flights and the commute that employees engage with can take the lion's share. We have clients who have upwards of 70, 80% of their total corporate footprint measured to be literally the flights and commutes that employees take, those categories 6 and 7 within scope 3. So
I mean, I think that Emerald falls sort of in that space too, because, you know, I look at this, and we at Emerald have a lot of clients who have manufacturing facilities, that the pie is going to look different for them. But for an organization, consultant, service-based, where you have offices and people, that's really where it comes from. So it's not all the same, but there's still, right, a huge puzzle for people in that puzzle piece for people, right?
Yeah, and it can be shocking, right? Because you assume we operate, we do all kinds of business, we have servers, we have offices, and then you see how much a flight can impact a corporate footprint. It's dramatic. You wouldn't expect it always. So I think you may have had a similar experience, right, when you went through yours.
Right. So should we go to the next?
Yeah, and so the next reason that employees matter in a big way in emissions reporting is ultimately that when you think about net zero, right, as a long-term strategy, it is most effectively described as a change management objective, right? We are putting together a 5, 10, 30-year, in some cases, objective of reaching net zero. And any change management strategy that has this much investment in it, has this much of a huge business overhaul associated with it, you need employees engaged thoughtfully in it, right? They need to be considered as stakeholder number one in being clearly understanding the plan, knowing where they fit into the plan, where are we in the timeline of the plan, so that they care enough to execute the beautiful plan. They're all obviously the ones actually pushing it forward, right? So gotta give them a reason why.
Right. So before we dig a little bit farther into this, I didn't want to get too ahead of how we met and why we're here together. So as many of Emerald's followers know, we achieved B Corp status, certified status earlier this year after a multi-year waiting period to get that through the pipeline. And soon thereafter, I received this email from Jack who says, "Hey, we're B Corp pending." Yeah, and I know what that means. And would you like to chat? And we have this opportunity, and some people know that I had a software company at one point in time, as well as being the leader of Emerald. And so I have just an affinity for startups and for software companies, especially those that are trying to solve big problems. So before we go deeper into this, and I know I'm throwing you a curveball here, tell us a little bit about you and your journey to Carbon Neutral Club.
Oh my, how much time do we have? Okay, I'll give you a quick one. Yeah, so I come from a background in technology. So prior to Carbon Neutral Club, I'd been a product manager building software with teams. I grew up in a very progressive household, for lack of a better word. Climate was a big part of my life growing up. It shaped my worldview. And as I grew personally, professionally, I just became increasingly frustrated. I worked at a tech company, and a lot of we push on what can our climate strategy be, and the answers are always quite elusive. We don't have a very obvious footprint, so we're going to invest elsewhere, and that always was a bit of a frustrating experience. The pandemic hit. Everything changed in my life. I met up with one of my now co-founders, Jeff, and then the third Roe, and we started conceptualizing how do we make climate action something that is embedded in an organization, regardless of what their measured scope 1, scope 2, their actual output is. And we built several versions. What we're talking about Carbon Neutral Club as today is different than it was when we launched, but yeah, we are now very intently focused on workforces and helping communities within organizations understand emissions, most importantly, reduce emissions, and then connect and support really high quality carbon removal, carbon offsetting projects around the world. And then, I don't know, maybe a year into that is when you received my email, and that's when our journey started. So
right,
that's
right.
a bit of the journey.
So yeah, and so we at Emerald, we rolled out Carbon Neutral Club to our employees. I think it was in July. And so that's great. So let's get into it. How do we know employees? We know that they need to be involved, right? But in your experience, do they want to be? That's the big question.
Okay,
So
I'll answer this question. But I want to put it back to you. At Emerald, like, obviously you're doing climate driven work, but is your team engaged? Were they asking? Were they thoughtfully looking for ways in?
So my team was surprised and engaged immediately and excited. You know, it's not like we went shopping last week or 2 weeks ago for an employee engagement program around carbon emissions, right? It just isn't a thing. So, and I can relate to, like, how do you sell something that people don't know they want, right? So of course, when we brought it to them, their eyes just started twinkling. And I do think one piece, which we maybe can get into a little bit more in the Q&A, around the businesses that you support, that it ties in with the rewards and engagement piece. I know they're sending you ideas. Like, they are not only engaged, but they're engaged with you and the organization, because we want to see you succeed. So, all right, should we go to the next one?
Well, I'll answer the question. I wanted to throw it back to you to hear what you had to say, but it's not so much what you're referring to. It sounds like, Laura, is Carbon Neutral Club, a solution for employee engagement. But in a broader sense, you know, your question was, how do we know employees want to be engaged, right? And if you go, I think, to the next slide here, there's two big pieces, right? So if we just look at the data, is there engagement in climate as a problem space? The answer is overwhelmingly yes, in a huge way. 82% of the global workforce is asking to be included in climate efforts. We are seeing a huge trend of employees looking to transition their jobs from whatever department or industry they're within into climate. This is something that everyone's thinking about, and we have access to, for lack of a better word, this potential climate army being the global workforce, who's ready, willing, looking for ways in. So the interest, the engagement is there. And I think what you're referring to, Laura, is connecting, there's all these people who would love to be involved, but how do we get them involved? Like, it's complicated. So there's that point. And then if you tap forward one more, the next piece is that employees, the modern workforce, I alluded to this, is making decisions about who we work for, buy from, vote for, engage with through this lens of climate action to a degree that we've never seen before. So between the ask to be involved and then the actual data around employment, purchase decision-making, around sustainability and climate, we can see very clearly that there's unbelievable pent-up interest, demand to engage with climate. The problem historically has been, how do we take this interest and translate it into action? And that's part of what we're trying to solve for.
Yeah, and I can speak to that increasingly our clients who are working on major renovation, new construction projects, or coming to us to help them develop a roadmap strategy, one of the key drivers is retention and attraction of employees. And they have figured out, well, there's some ways to do the math to make the direct line between these efforts and the bottom line, but they just know it to be true that they're being asked, the stakeholders. I mean, the whole notion of stakeholders and employees are a huge piece of this. So
yeah, totally.
Great.
I mean, and just very quickly, drawing between this employee engagement investment really and the bottom line, it comes down to awareness, engagement, but driving reductions, right? Net zero long-term is taking your footprint from here and pulling it down as far as possible. But that's not just going to happen, obviously, right? So the goal would be to drive employee engagement with the KPI being centered around footprint reduction associated with employees. And right. I'm sure we'll get more into that, but.
Good. All right, so I think we're up for our next section of our dialogue today, talking about how companies can effectively engage. So I'll tee you up for the next piece of the puzzle.
Yes. So there's like, we joke about this. There's two ways you can have an employee engagement strategy. The first is what we call the Earth Day strategy, which is like an event based, like one time a year, everyone's going to think about climate and then go back to work. And then there's this more thoughtful, like long-term engagement approach, which considers employees as a stakeholder, not just someone that is an informed third party. So these are the key criteria that we see as centering a really structured employee engagement approach. The first and foremost is simple language. I think everyone tends to want to sound smart and use big scientific words. For lack of a better, I'm a new dad, so I can say this. Talk about climate like you're talking to your parents. Like explain it in a way that to someone who has no connection to it. It doesn't need to be kind of wowed by your incredible knowledge of the science and the nitty gritty. Keep it high level and keep it simple. The next piece is mostly, it says communicate clear targets, but it's mostly about target setting and making those targets really tangible and simple for anyone to understand in terms that they understand. Now, along the journey, we built Carbon Neutral Club around this concept of incentive and reward. That is no secret, but building a behavioral change model into the employee engagement strategy is critical. Just because someone says we're going to reduce our personal footprints by 10% this year doesn't mean that I'm going to just go do that as an employee, right? You need to give me some sort of a reason to want to do that, and you totally can, right? In making these targets into compensation packages, promotion journeys, gamification, just like social validation across the teams. There's lots of ways you can do this financially and not, but it's key to have incentive baked in. Reporting on progress is really simply, where are we at in the journey? I need to know as an employee where we're headed and where we are, and if where we are is good enough based on the original plan. This fifth one here, meet employees where they are. This is both a physical thing. So where are employees living throughout their day? Do they respond via email, Slack, Teams? How do you communicate with your team directly? As well as meeting them where they are from like a knowledge perspective, right? Like if your team is historically not engaged with climate, has been pushed back on ESG initiatives broadly, you got to meet them there and work with that. And that is just the context with which you need to build around your strategy. Last point, and is most important of all, is celebrating and the wins and the losses together, right? Making sure communications are centered around us as a team, not here is the chief sustainability officer who's going to take all the win and loss in their report on them as a team, right? This is a company-wide change management strategy. Everyone's celebrated in the process along the way. So making that context really clear up from the beginning.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So tell us how you do it. Tell us how the Carbon Neutral Club works and what the key components of the program are.
Yeah, for sure. So Carbon Neutral Club's objective is to take climate action and embed it in company culture, and we do it using these three tools. The first is education. So we offer a plain language, non-scientific, simple onboarding to the climate problem space so anybody can take part. As mentioned earlier, we do have a core behavioral change model that creates an incentive for anyone to understand and then action reduction opportunities in their footprint. And then most important of all, doing it within the context of a community, a team, a workforce with common objectives. So if you tap to the next slide, as we begin the journey, the first step, if it's available, is Carbon Neutral Club can ingest your organization's footprint and your net zero targets and strategy and communicate that to the team. So we have a baseline starting point of where are we headed and where are we at in that journey, which is ongoing, accessible. The next slide, the next piece is each employee, if you just tap forward, awesome, is to give each employee the tools to calculate both their personal as well as their employee-related Scope 3 emissions in categories 6 and 7 for business travel, commute. We're also able to capture work from home related emissions, as well as employees calculating their personal lives. So nothing to do with work, just things that are interesting. Your diet, your household, your consumption habits, your transportation habits, so that it's not just this work activity, but something you can personally relate to. So once we have these two footprints, we can then set off a journey of reduction and engage employees in a way that is thoughtful based on the nature of their footprint. So here we have an example of someone who's got a footprint. This is their dashboard. They have that footprint broken down into these subcategories, and they've got an overage here in business travel. So we're going to offer this person a challenge, an actual opportunity to reduce that footprint and be rewarded for it. In other categories like home, diet, travel, we draw on 75 sustainable brand partners who are everything from food and grocery partners to clothing, home goods, baby products, etc., that are all best of breed, lowest impact in their category. And these sustainable partners offer low impact and actually discounted offerings to our members. So back to that incentive, if you reduce your impact in the diet category, we may say, based on your high red meat consumption that you reported, here's a plant-based meat alternative that will reduce your footprint by a kilogram, a ton annually, as an example, and we're going to save you $50 a month on your protein bills, which is awesome, right? So real reward. The last piece, and then I'll stop talking, is once we understand the nature of your footprint, we connect our clients with really, really high impact, vetted, and a really well-rounded portfolio of carbon removal and avoidance credits, carbon offsets. So we can measure and offset to any degree of the footprint. Some of our clients are fully carbon neutral workforces, others partial or just focused on scope 3, but we help connect those dots.
Awesome.
That's the overview of what we do.
Cool. So right before we take us into the Q&A section, we had this snippet of Emerald's climate impact report from our time with you since, like I said, July. Do you want to give any words to this one before we open it up to the group? So put the Q&A into your questions into the Q&A panel while we're wrapping up here, and we'll get to you in a second. Go, Jack.
Yeah. Yes, awesome. Emerald has been a client, onboarded the tool teams for, I think, 5 months is what I look back at. So what we're looking at here is the measured carbon footprint of the workforce, about 108 tons. That's an annual number. And then each month we have carbon offsets being invested in on behalf of the employees by Emerald, which is so awesome. Like, I want to work at Emerald. The 23 tons is our year to date. So within those 5 months, on behalf of employees, Emerald's offset 23 tons of carbon emissions, which is huge when you think about what that volume actually is. Over that period of time, they've been funding 9 incredible projects, and about 100%, the whole workforce is opted into the program. It's an optional program, right? So we would never enforce it on anybody, but it's so awesome to see that made available to your team. We've got such incredible engagement. So
and so
it's impressive.
Yeah, and the one thing that's happened to us since we started is we've onboarded at least one new full-time person, more to come. So that workforce footprint goes up as a result of us doing more work to reduce carbon in the world. So, coming to a balance is something that we were, paying a lot of attention to, that as we meet our business goals and help our clients do more, we're going to be creating more footprint that we need to manage and offset. So let's open it up. Lisa, do you have any questions for us from the audience?
I sure do. I've got a couple. So this one is kind of general from the audience. Testing. Can you describe a little bit more about how you do the testing and how that process works?
I assume testing is the footprinting, the measurement activity.
I would assume so.
I will assume so. Okay, cool. So yes, so we as part of onboarding an employee, the first thing you'll do is go through the carbon calculation activity. We have a partnership with an organization called Deconomy. We leverage their methodology, their calculator, which was built in conjunction with the UN. And it's best in breed. It's fantastic. It cuts across personal emissions like diet, consumption, household, as well as those scope 3 categories. One thing I will say is when you onboard, this is the first step in the educational journey, right? It's intended to be accessible from a knowledge perspective, not cumbersome from an onboarding perspective, but give us enough data to give you a thoughtful footprint, defensible footprint. So that first calculation is about 12 questions that asks in detail across those 5 categories. But once you've onboarded, that's when the fun begins. That's when we can prompt you to say, hey, there are 15 more questions within transportation to really understand how many cars does your household have? How often are each of them driven? Do you have any subcategories to mention? So we offer great depth once you've gotten in, but offer a very nice plain language onboarding to everybody. So I hope that answers the question.
Sounds like it to me. So I'm going to save for last, what is your favorite carbon neutral club brand partner? And you can tie that in potentially with an answer to what kind of companies stand to gain the most from building an employee-centered climate strategy. So you can use an example if you want.
Yes, for sure. So my favorite sustainable brand partner, not supposed to pick favorites, but I'm particularly interested in the impact that a company called Chop Value has. When we met them first, they are a furniture company, so they make wooden, beautiful furniture, and they do it all from recycled chopsticks. I don't have all the stats here on hand. I highly recommend checking out Chop Value. The amount of carbon emissions that they avoid by capturing what would have gone to landfill, the wooden chopsticks, and then redesigning them into these incredible furniture pieces is huge. It's like massive potential impact. So I'm excited about them. It's just like a concept and impact potential tool. And then what companies stand to gain the most from joining Carbon Neutral Club? Well, I think, classic answer, everyone, but to a very specific degree, organizations who have a climate strategy that requires long-term change, that are looking to engage employees, we work with a ton. We also work with companies who have a relatively lower carbon scope 1, scope 2 emission sources. Therefore, a lot of that footprint lies within scope 3. And as we talked about earlier, a lot of that lies with the employee. So companies in consulting, in technology, in finance are companies that we work with a lot, but obviously much broader than that as well.
Quick question here, is offsetting required to be a carbon neutral club member?
It is not. It's not required. We offer it. It's always available, and we try and make that path easy. Offsetting is not the solution. We don't offset our way out of the climate crisis, but offsets are a really key climate finance tool. We do support and feel strongly should exist long term. So our goal is to just make those projects available, make sure you have high quality projects that are vetted, and you can engage with them however you'd like, sort of thing.
Awesome. And this one seems to be it's for both of you, but I'm going to suggest Laura start with it. How does CNC, Carbon Neutral Club, help your business?
So for us, it's definitely an engagement tool. And, Jack, I don't think I shared this with you yet. We had our annual planning retreat a couple of weeks ago. So the leadership team got together and had a deep conversation around our individual impact in our scope 3 and our commuting and our travel, and how are we going to manage this and feel like we're able to make a difference and reducing our own emissions. We're in leased office space. We can't control our scope 2. It is what it is. So scope 3 is where it's all at. And we had a really long conversation. I don't know that we solved it, but you just said we can't offset our way out of the problem, and we can't. They are a important tool. And so the fact that we're even just now having different kind of layers of dialogue internally about how we're going to approach this, I think it stems a lot from bringing you in and Carbon Neutral Club and engaging everyone in this conversation as a team, not just in our client service.
So
That's
that's a great
amazing.
way to close. We're at the end of our time. Do you have any last thoughts you'd like to share, Laura?
I'd open it up to Jack. Any parting thoughts you want to give?
Climate's a team game, and if you're interested in figuring out how to thoughtfully engage your workforce in an activity that historically has been really put on the sustainability team or the CEO's shoulders, reach out. Or my email's here on the screen. Would love to chat.
Yeah, awesome. And then Lisa, to your point, giving it to me, I think my parting shot is, again, this really is an employee attraction, retention, engagement opportunity, and we're not going to collectively meet our carbon goals and our emissions reduction goals without having this kind of dialogue. It's a great tool for that purpose, but you just have to start somewhere. And so doing some level of benchmarking of what the emissions are, if you pick one scope at a time, start with scope 2. It's the easiest to do. Look at your utility bills and then build out from there. But just getting an idea and getting on this path is, I think, really important for all of our futures. So thank you everyone for being here.
Thank you, everyone. Have a
Thank you,
wonderful
Laura.
rest of your day.